Okay, well, before we dive into some stuff, obviously coming up this weekend with the game, some other NFL rapid fire stuff, I wanted to dive into, I think the big news today, it's the Arizona Cardinals who fired everybody. Well, Kliff officially got fired. Shocker, who saw that one coming? And Steve Keim resigned, quit. That one's kind of hard to put your finger on exactly. Weird situation there. They don't have a GM and they don't have a coach. And I think what separates that situation from every other situation currently, now this is a fluid thing. I'm recording this like an hour before the national championship game. If you're listening to this on Tuesday, maybe more guys have lost their jobs. Who knows? But all these other job openings, Denver, Carolina, Indy, they have general managers. Now, how much juice those GMs will have, we'll see. If they hire a Jim Harbaugh, if they hire a Sean Payton in any of those spots, obviously Sean Payton's going to want to bring his general manager or the guy that he believes in, which all rumors point to be Ryan Pace, which I think is insane. But listen, who's to tell Sean Payton who he's comfortable with? And clearly he likes Ryan Pace. And I just think that we believe on the outside, not me, but just a lot of people, when you hear general manager, that all general manager jobs are the same. And they're just simply not. Some GMs have a lot more juice than other GMs. Some GMs start out with less juice, and then over time, John Schneider, Brett Veach develop into having a lot of pull inside their organization. Then some guys, like a Howie Roseman, are in full control, right? So every individual franchise, when I say full control, like he's got a lot of power, unlike a lot of GMs. And then guys like Bill Belichick who tell everyone what to do. So just because you have a title does not mean you actually have the decision-making power. I learned from a buddy a long time ago when I lived in San Francisco. This is an Ivy League guy. Love him, Bobby. And he's high up, mover and shaker in the finance world, and played baseball in the Ivy League. But he's an Ivy League intellect. This guy's a wheeler and a dealer. I remember he changed jobs. I lived with him when I was scouting the West Coast. I kind of used his apartment, which he just purchased at the time, which he ended up selling for double. And he's like, I'm moving jobs from one financial company to another. And he really fought for a title. Like he wanted a different, like to be a vice president. And he's like, looking back, he ended up leaving that company for someone else. He's like, you know what I should have fought for? Pay. They could have called me a freaking intern. I was so big on my title, yet the money and the decision-making power and how much juice you have is all that matters. You can call me whatever you want. But if I have the juice to run my show however I want to run the show, and I have ownership of it, and I get control of the revenue, that's what matters. You can call me the assistant podcaster intern. It doesn't matter. Titles are very overrated. It's about what you actually have the ability to do on the inside. And a lot of these GM jobs, like, is Chris Ballard going to have a lot of juice? Because it sure feels like Jim Irsay is doing whatever the hell he wants. You know, George Payton, they hired him a couple years ago from Minnesota. Well, they got a brand new ownership, and they got Walmart money. And are they really going to listen to him? We'll find out, right? Carolina, Fitterer. He was hired when Matt Rule was there. Matt Rule's long gone. So does Dave Tepper really believe in this guy? I don't know. But those guys still exist. So this notion that these open jobs, there's only one open general manager job currently, and that is the Arizona Cardinals. And listen, I moved here, right? I love this area. I think North Scottsdale is one of my favorite areas I've ever been to. It's gorgeous, beautiful. Money's flowing here. People are good looking. It feels new. Industry's booming. To me, I'm betting big on this general area for the next several decades. It's hot, but I don't mind the heat, right? We can nitpick any area. But the Cardinals have one thing going against them. Because in theory, you go, well, they don't have a GM. They don't have a coach. The owner says that he wants to hire a GM first. The area is great schools, cool area to live. Obviously, wives are going to like it. Sweet houses, pretty affordable price point relative to some cities. But they have one negative anchor to the franchise, and that's the quarterback. And every single person I know in the NFL, I don't claim to know that many people, but I know people in several organizations. They all talk to each other. Because when you scout or coach, if you do it long enough, and when I say long enough, 10 plus years, you're going to end up working around a lot of people. Coaches all talk to other coaches before games. Scouts are all at schools with other scouts. So over time, you just get to know guys. and you develop a relationship. Who are most of your professional relationships with as you age? People in your industry, people that you can vent to, people that you can bounce ideas off, people that you can complain to, people that you get information from. Every single person that I know that tells me, you know what I'm hearing in Arizona? They can't stand Kyler. And it's obviously well documented. He was not well liked in the building. But here's the problem. You can't get rid of the guy. He is under contract for the foreseeable future. And he's coming off an injury. So in his mind, and as we've learned, and we always learn, you don't fire players. That's why coaches are always the first to go. You couldn't fire Russell Wilson. You couldn't fire Kyler Murray. And I'm not acting like Nate Hackett or Kliff Kingsbury deserve to keep their job. But that's the logical decision, is to get rid of them. Because if they could get rid of Kyler Murray, if they could get rid of Russell Wilson, obviously they would entertain those thoughts. It's a no-brainer decision. You get rid of both, but you can't because of guaranteed money. And so when you look at the Cardinals, their job's pretty intriguing, right? Because it's the only general manager job open. And unlike coaches, which right now there are currently 5 head coaching jobs open, that could change, could end up being 7 or 8. We'll see. Time will tell. But coaching jobs come open every single year. At minimum 5, sometimes 7 to 9. General manager jobs, there are years where no GM jobs open. So it's easy to go, I wouldn't want to mess with Kyler Murray. If anything, you should sell yourself on, well, there's a lot to work with, and it's one of 32. It is a hard job to get your hands on. And here's the other thing. Steve Keim had that job for a long time. The owner has shown, while the franchise, I heard this while I was watching some of the press conference, has never had a head coach in the history of the franchise. Now, the franchise has been located in several different places. It's over 100 years old. They've never had a coach for longer than 6 years. It's an underachieving franchise. But there is a lot to work with beside Kyler Murray. And it's going to be fascinating. Now, ultimately, the organization has a history of being pretty cheap. And the cheap decision here, because they're paying Kingsbury, and let's face it, probably Keim, to go away, and potentially all of Kingsbury's staff, it's not cheap, even though money's all relative. And now paying $30-40 million for a coaching staff and executives to leave, while it sounds like a lot of money to the overwhelming majority of human beings on this earth, when you get $300+ million just from the media rights alone, not counting your ticket revenue, not counting the other revenue you get from the stadium, like it's an accounting error. Now, would you rather still have 40 or 50 or $30 million? Of course. But this is not a business that, well, they made $50 million in revenue and they got to spend 40 of it to pay someone to go away. That's not the way it works. Maybe they got to spend 5 or 6 or 8% of their annual revenue to get someone to leave, but so be it. Welcome to the NFL. And I think all these owners are realizing we can't afford it. Now, can we afford to then go after Sean Payton and say, hey, we'll give you $100 million? Probably not. It's why all signs are pointing to the organization doing something dumb, potentially doing co-general managers, which to me makes no sense, and elevating Vance Joseph. That's where I'd put my money on, because ultimately this owner has a long history of being somewhat cheap, and that is the cheap move. And if I wanted to defend him on that move, they have a problem with Kyler Murray for the next several years. You might as well just ride that out and then try to pivot, because I do believe that you would have several personnel people very, very interested in this job. I do wonder from a coaching perspective whether you could get an established coach or whether you'd have to take a swing on a first-time head coach. And they've done that before with Steve Wilkes, and it failed. Now, they've also done it with Bruce Arians, and it succeeded. But Bruce Arians had a lot of success. Why? They got Carson Palmer. They got Carson Palmer, and they crushed it. Steve Wilkes got Josh Rosen, failed. Kingsbury got Kyler Murray, failed. So I think it's going to be fascinating to watch this play out. And I think when you look at the other organizations like Denver, they're sniffing around all the big dogs. I would be shocked if they don't offer jobs to guys like Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh, does he have the juice at this current time to bring in his personnel man? Because if he does, and they want to hire him, then their general manager will get fired. Does Jeff Saturday keep the job? As crazy as that sounds, and I say every single human to that watched the Colts over this last month and a half and just watched them lose game after game after game would go, how in the hell would he keep the job? I'll tell you how. The owner's nuts and he wants to hire him. And what's anyone going to do? I think I talked about this a couple weeks ago. Like, if you're a Colts fan, are you just going to not renew your Colts season tickets? And ultimately, where they need you the most is to watch the games. So if you're a Colts fan, are you not going to watch the game? I got news for you. You won't. You'll still watch. So that is where I'd be a betting man, is that Jeff Saturday keeps that job. And then Carolina, like, is Dave Tepper really leaning on this general manager? I know that Federer said that they will not have a long list of candidates. And, signs coming into yesterday were pointing towards Steve Wilkes keeping the job. I'm always hesitant to keep interim coaches. I think there's a natural kind of jolt and just want to prove it, not just the interim coach, but the players. It's just a tumultuous time when someone gets fired in the middle of the season. Unlike Indy, you usually just see some improvement, guys fighting hard. My guess, and if I had to place a bet, would be that Steve Wilkes does not keep that job. But to me, it's going to be fascinating what happens with all those general managers. And we will just kind of stay fluid with the situation. I'm not going to break down all the different individuals who were thrown interview requests as they interview, and as the Schefters and the rap sheets say that this is the final three. Then to me, that becomes pretty interesting. Because like the Tennessee Titans, for example, they have, I guess technically they have a general manager job open. But is it a general manager job? Because in my opinion, you're just a personnel guy. Vrabel's the boss. Every single player that will come through there moving forward will be Vrabel's choice. Your job, which is an important job, will be to run the scouting department, college and pro, and do everything that Mike Vrabel needs. Now, part of being a GM is servicing your coaching staff that way, from a pro standpoint and from a college standpoint, running the two personnel sides. But there's a difference in working together and working for someone. And I don't see how anyone views the Titans' job as a normal general manager spot. The Arizona Cardinals, if you get hired before the coach, that's a true GM spot. The Titans, like, especially if you don't know Vrabel, that's more like a vice president of personnel. Let's dive into a couple playoff games, because I remember when I worked in radio, we had the Oakland A's, and they were really good at the time. They had Yoenis Cespedes. They had Josh Donaldson. They traded for Lester. They had some really good teams when I was around them. And Billy Beane was the head honcho, and he had some other, Harvard analytical elites around him. And they ran a high-level operation. Their owner was a clown, didn't spend any money. Don't totally blame him because they didn't make any money. That's a whole nother conversation. But they believed to their core, numbers. And for the most part, in the regular season, it really worked. And Billy Beane has a famous line that, I don't know if he said it in the movie, but he said it in Michael Lewis's book. And he's said this over the years, that my shit doesn't work in the playoffs. Like, his analytical way and philosophy of building a team is based on the regular season. And in baseball, it's about the long haul, right? Trying to get to 90, 95 wins is a lot different than trying to win 2 out of 5 games, or I guess it would be 3 out of 5 games, or 4 out of 7, right? And for the most part, Billy Beane's teams have not had a lot of success in the playoffs despite making it all the time. And one thing I remember being around the team, you just kind of get to meet guys and hear stories, and you get friends with the coaching staff who doesn't always see eye to eye with the front office and the numbers. Is the number of people in baseball, this isn't true in football, but in baseball, they always believe that there is no difference between pressure in the playoffs and just a regular season game. An at-bat is an at-bat. A situation is a situation. And I always thought, that's fucking insane. The pressure in the 7th inning of a tie game in Game 5 or Game 7 of a playoff series is dramatically different than some random game in June that nobody's watching. I said, Daryl Morey, I always believe, like, you got to change your strategy a little bit in the playoffs. Shoot 3 after 3 after 3. Like, hey, guys, you shot 27 straight threes and you missed them all, and that's why you lost to the Warriors. How about, shoot a jumper, get to the basket, shoot a different shot? Like, this is what we do. I hate that mindset. I hate the stubborn mindset, and I hate the belief that pressure does not exist. We all know it does. Any single person listening to this, like, every day at the office is not the same. Even if you have high standards and are ambitious professional, like when you have a meeting or with a client who's going to be the biggest client your company or your business has ever done business with, that's a little different than just your typical day sending out some invoices. Not everything is the same on a daily basis. And I think there are two teams this upcoming weekend that the pressure on the two coaches is astronomical. Honestly, I don't think it could be any bigger because I think one thing they both share in common is they have the same seed. They're both the 5th seed. So when you're, a wild card, you play a road game. But both these two teams are favored, and they're favored for a reason. The Chargers are better than the Jags. I know the Jags beat them, but when healthy, the Chargers are better. And obviously the Cowboys are better than Tampa. You know why? Tampa's terrible. We'll see. I don't think Jacksonville's that good, but I think Jacksonville is better than Tampa Bay. Now, the difference is you got Tom Brady, and it's hard to bet against Tom Brady. But if you watch Tom Brady play this year, it has not been pretty. It has not been pretty at all. He threw 25 touchdowns and 9 picks. Honestly, I had to look that up because I was like, if I had to guess what TB12's TD to interception ratio was, I would have guessed, I guess he threw some touchdowns the last couple of weeks to inflate it a little bit. I probably would have guessed 22 and 14, and the eye test was horrendous. But let's start with Mike McCarthy. They've won, 24 games the last 2 years. They've had really good regular seasons. I know it's gotten a little weird here of late, but overall, you take the Eagles to the last game, have a chance to win the division. I know you lost, so it ultimately didn't matter, but you know what I mean. They have had back-to-back really good regular seasons. You got to win a playoff game. And last year, they didn't not only lose a playoff game, they kind of got worked. And it's not like they got worked by Joe Montana or Steve Young. Jimmy Garoppolo. I like Jimmy Garoppolo. Respect him. He's like the 17th best quarterback in the league. And the Niners shoved him around. And if it wasn't for just a hideous Jimmy Garoppolo interception, that game was a blowout. And if Mike McCarthy doesn't win this weekend, how does Jerry Jones not fire him and go hire Sean Payton? How does he not do that? How could he keep Mike McCarthy if, we're not judging the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy on regular season games. No, I say this all the time about baseball. No one cares about some random game in August. Baseball diehards do. People that cover the game do, but ultimately it just doesn't matter. It just does not matter. One individual game throughout a baseball season does not matter. That's not the case in football. Of 17 games, you got to get to double digits because you got to make the playoffs, but a large percentage of the games really matter. Clearly, some games matter more than others. Divisional opponents, games late in the season if you're, on the playoff bubble. But when it comes to Mike McCarthy, part of the reason they hired him and they gave him 5 years, 7, he got a $35, $40 million contract. Super Bowl winner, had a lot of success. Well, he's had success with the Cowboys. And honestly, I tip my hat to him this year. It was an impressive year. Dak got hurt. I thought their team wasn't as talented. And boom, you look up, they win 12 games. But now you're playing Tampa Bay, who is not very good. And Tom Brady, who is, I would say, a shell of himself. Tampa Bay, to me, the craziest stat about Tampa Bay, in a division which is obviously really bad. A coach was fired at the end of September. The one team had to come out today and get their coaches back, the Saints, and the Atlanta Falcons just aren't any good and really don't have much of a future. Tampa Bay, of the 4 teams in their division, had the worst point differential. Minus 45. Obviously, they're under 500, but minus 45, they are really bad. They're just not very good. Mike McCarthy has to win this game, or to me, he's getting fired. And the other guy that has to win, because I think it's easy to nitpick playing guys the last game of the season, though I think there are 2 examples on his team that it's listen, I understand playing Justin Herbert, keep it rolling. Mike Williams has been injured several times. And clearly, when he's healthy, your team is dramatically different. So to have him out there in that game, which obviously early on, the result of Baltimore does not mean anything, is inexcusable. To me, when we think we have to win, he's playing whatever. The moment I find out we don't have to win, not only is he coming off the field, I'm taking his helmet away. I might even tell Mike, take off your pads. When Trent Williams got pulled out of the game, when they were beating the crap out of the Cardinals, they had a pick, in the fourth quarter, and a guy ran up to the end zone to celebrate with his teammates. Trent Williams was there. Pads were off. He was just on the sideline. So to me, you should have yanked out Mike Williams in that game and Joey Bosa. Like, what are we doing? But regardless, we're here. You got to win this game. You're favored on the road against the Jacksonville Jags and a quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, which we're high on, but let's face it, against the Titans at home in a big spot, didn't look that great. You have Justin Herbert. You have a ton of good players. I think you have a lot of pressure because, like the Cowboys, Sean Payton would immediately take those two jobs. He's been pretty open, and he just was open on Fox Morning Show. He's coming back if he finds the right job. Well, those two jobs are really good. Cowboys job, it's Dallas freaking Cowboys. And their team's pretty good. To me, the Chargers job is better in Dallas just strictly because they have Justin Herbert. And anytime that you can coach Justin Herbert, a guy that you can win a Super Bowl with, I think Sean Payton is going to be very, very interested in that job. I talked about this on Sunday's pod. I do believe that the playoffs, we got the two worst possibilities for the 7 seed. And it's why that when you look at the 2-7 games, the 49ers are a 10.5-point favorite. I think by the time there's kickoff, I think the Bills could be favored by like 11.5, 12. That should not happen. Now, part of the reason we're there is because the Packers didn't take care of business. Now, the Packers weren't that good anyway, but they're better in Seattle. And I would have much rather seen the Lions against the 49ers. But we're here. The 49ers are playing Seattle the Saturday afternoon game, which is historically the game that's kind of a throwaway game. Last year, it was Bengals-Raiders. It's usually not a brand of the 49ers level. But because they're playing Seattle, which I don't think there is a soul that's going to pick Seattle. I think universally, every single person is going to pick the 49ers and the Bills to win those two games. And there's a reason. I mean, it's an enormous point spread for a playoff game. I actually don't think this weekend is that great. I think Saturday's pretty intriguing just because Jacksonville showed out. That playoff atmosphere for them on Saturday night, week 18, was pretty damn good. They have some fun players. They have a lot of speed on their team. I like watching a young quarterback trying to come into his own, getting some, kind of a first rep at a big moment. And then the pressure that is on the Chargers to win that game. Because to me, if Brandon Staley loses that game, I don't see how he keeps his job when it's clear that Sean Payton will take it. And then you get to Sunday. It's hard for me with the Ravens-Bengals game. Harbaugh said again today, he can't answer this Lamar question. We talked about it last week. That is a bizarre situation, but honestly, was easy to see coming. Any human being who's ever in a professional spot, every single person listening to this, that has been at a job or has ran a business and had an employee that had a money issue, it gets awkward. Whether you're talking about a raise from $80,000 to $100,000, whether you're talking about a contract of hundreds of millions of dollars. The moment I think I'm underpaid or I'm getting screwed or we're not on the same page, eventually it's not going to be workable. It's so easy to be like, just be professional. Just compartmentalize. Don't think about it, which I think we have to do with a lot of things in our life, right? I think it's very, very difficult to do with money. I really do. And I think the overwhelming majority of human beings struggle with it. I do. You more likely do. Lamar clearly is. And it's in a tough situation. And when the rubber meets the road, as it has with the Ravens when he got this knee injury, I don't blame him for being like, yeah, I don't know if I'm coming back. And the Ravens clearly have no clue. And people talk about maybe he won't be on the team. Maybe he won't. Maybe this is just one of those situations where it's like, maybe it's time to go our separate ways. And obviously there would be teams, Washington, the Jets, Miami. I would imagine there'd be a lot of teams that would be very, very interested. Lamar Jackson, if he became available, it'd be complicated because you have to trade picks. But in theory, that game should be good. But if you tell me Lamar's not playing, I just don't think it is. Obviously, the morning game, Bills-Miami's not very good. I mean, there's one good game to me over the weekend. I guess two good games. Like I said, the Saturday night game and Giants-Vikings. If Brian Daboll not only makes the playoffs, but wins a playoff game, just a remarkable freaking season. Now, I think everyone's going to pick the Giants. Literally everyone's going to hammer the Giants. I'm probably going to end up taking the Vikings. From a gambling perspective, I might just take the Vikings -3. I don't love Cousins' playoff atmosphere. Is it home, though? And I just think so many people, and that's basically my logic. When every single human hangs a left, when it comes to gambling, sometimes you just got to hang a right. And then I think Monday night, just from a brand standpoint, the biggest brand in the league, the Cowboys. Now, it's weird. Like, they're the biggest brand, but they don't have the playoff success. Ton of pressure on McCarthy, ton of pressure on Dak. Playing Brady in a weird spot, he's kind of got nothing to lose. But just the overarching theme with his, like, is this it? Is he coming back next year? And if he does come back, like, where's he going? Would he play for the Jets? He's going to come to the Raiders? What's he going to do? So the moment he loses, kind of like with Rodgers, he lost, and Tirico's like, sure feels like he's going to retire. Does? He's got like $100 million coming to him the next couple of years. He's going to leave. And they start saying these weird comments after. And listen, I don't try to judge people. I'm not that religious or spiritual. I would say I'm more spiritual than religious. But then I watch a guy like Aaron Rodgers talk, and I'm like, well, I'm actually probably not that spiritual. I don't think I'm slamming ayahuasca and like singing to the heavens. But it's a bizarre situation. I've come around, I think, on Coward's side of just, what is the point of all this? Like, so many people toward the end of his run with Green Bay used to be like, Brett Favre is a drama queen. For this guy who claims to be like this rural kind of hick from Mississippi, tough guy, blue collar, it's like he kind of became this elitist, always had to be in the headlines, needed Peter King, Ed Werder, and Chris Mortensen talking about him. And I don't necessarily think Rodgers looks at it like that, but the end result is the same. He's always talking about his future and whether he's going to come back or not. Like, most people don't talk like that. Tom Brady hasn't really started talking like that until he was 45 years old. He was adamant every single year, I'm going to keep playing, I'm going to keep playing, I'm going to keep playing. Peyton Manning and Drew Brees are good examples. The only reason both guys stopped playing is they couldn't play anymore. They couldn't play anymore. If Drew Brees and Peyton Manning could still play at Aaron Rodgers' level, they never would have uttered the word retirement. So I understand from a Packers fan standpoint, like, it's a little exhausting. You got to be better than your problems. And for a long period of time, just like Favre, you're so freaking good, I'll deal with whatever. Like, it's starting to get to that line where it's like, let's not act like you're Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes right now, buddy. You were the previous couple years back-to-back MVPs. We'll deal with the drama. But this year, you start talking, you dating, blue sky, and you're popping pills and smoking trees. And I'm pro smoking trees, but you're doing some weird trees. Talking about your future that might not include football. If you're going to do that, you better throw 45 touchdowns. And you better not lose to the Lions week 18. Or it's like, yeah, if Gutekunst and these guys want to move on from me, I'm behind it. And I wonder if the fan base, because part of what's hard about making a move to get rid of like a historic player like a Favre or like a Rodgers is, for the most part, the fans are going to turn on you because it's not the right move. Though when Ted Thompson did it, everyone thought he was crazy. He turned out to be a genius. Now, I think it's fair to say that Jordan Love is not the next Favre or Rodgers, but it might just be as simple as like, yeah, we don't really want to deal with this guy. Like, you're just going to show back up July 28th. You're just going to disappear for 7 months, which is your prerogative, but we're paying you $50 million. Like, I'm all for not showing up to OTAs. I say this all the time about the work from home movement. I've worked from home since 2016, but I also have not had a salary since 2018. I have to produce. I have to earn revenue, or there is no money coming my way. Every dollar that comes my way is revenue. Without it, it doesn't exist. If you paid me $400,000, I just work from home, my work ethic would probably not be the same. And I see all these people in the tech world complaining like, oh, my boss wants me to come back to work. Well, yeah, I'm paying you $300,000. I don't know what the hell you're doing. If you're at home and you're not making a salary and it's all based on incentives and sales, like, yeah, I can see whether you're working or not. But that ain't the case. And trust me, I'm invested in some of these companies. I'm all for, like, let's figure our shit out. No different than the quarterback. I'm cool with you sitting out OTAs, but you better dominate. You have to show some appreciation on our side. Like, what are we paying all this for? What are we paying all this for? Everyone freaked out about, like, does this guy really need to be at OTAs? And yeah, when he has Devontae Adams and some veteran guys, of course not. But that wasn't the case this year. And the drama with him is just never ending. Like Lamar's drama, I get it. Now, I blamed him. I guess blame would be the wrong word. I sided with the Ravens. Like, bro, they offered you a ton of money and you turned it down. But listen, we all have to make decisions and live with it. But the moment you make that decision, the moment it becomes nut cutting time and my knee doesn't feel right, like, I ain't fucking laying it on the line for you. And that creates animosity on both sides. And that's clearly where they're at. So a lot of quarterback drama all over the league. Obviously, we're going to have a lot of moving parts with Jimmy Garoppolo's and Derek Carr's. But, you know, it's a fun part about the NFL. A little rapid fire. Speaking about quarterbacks, when you trade as much as the Cleveland Browns traded for Deshaun Watson because of, the area and just his saga, and the massage therapist and all the drama there, I said that I wasn't holding him to a high standard as a player this year. And I agreed with that. Like that statement, I meant it when I said it. But by the end of the season, like you would like to see a little bit of an improvement. And every time I watched him, he looked pretty average. And here's the thing. In the AFC, you don't just have good quarterbacks. Like you have guys that are going to the Hall of Fame. Like Patrick Mahomes right now at 28 years old, first ballot Hall of Famer. Josh Allen sure as hell is headed that way. Joe Burrow feels like he's already a legend. Justin Herbert, as Dion would say, he's coming. Trevor Lawrence, like, listen, he needs to improve, but let's be real. There's a lot to work with there. So the amount of talent, and here's the thing, the Steelers, Kenny Pickett, like, I don't think he's some elite talent, but we know their franchise is well run and they're going to be very, very competitive. And the Ravens, whatever happens with Lamar, like for the most part, they're a pretty high level operation. So the Cleveland Browns, who have a long history of not being well run, now are all their chips are in the middle of the table on Deshaun Watson, historic amount of money. They don't have picks forever. They're going to need this guy to be good. And the pressure on that guy this offseason to like, what we just went through last year, growing process, growing pains, whatever, you hadn't played in a while, that is not even like the gap we need you to jump from that back to Pro Bowl level player is a must because he didn't look remotely comfortable. He didn't look remotely close to what he once was. Here's what I will say, though. He's an instinctive quarterback. I would say he's more of a playmaker than some Peyton Manning level Patrick Mahomes slice and dice you. He was a great playmaker with the Texans. He does not have a great arm. Well, what does that division entail? Awful weather. Who are most of the productive quarterbacks historically in that division? Big arm guys. Big Ben. Flacco had some moments. Burrow, I wouldn't say is a great arm, but he's a great player. Watson better figure shit out, or else the Browns are in major, major trouble. I know they fired their defensive coordinator today. Someone had to go down, but I don't know, man. I would be a little nervous if I'm a Browns fan. Denver, they're clearly going to talk to a lot of people. And they're putting basically requests in for everybody, from Harbaugh to Sean Payton to DeMeco Ryans and assistant coaches. It's hard to like, this is who they're going to hire. It's hard to know because they have this new owner that has no history. And I would say one thing that's pretty clear, I don't think they're going to spare an expense. If you saw the story this weekend, I didn't click on the headline, so I just saw the headline. I don't know if the grass got messed up, if they had a concert. I don't know exactly why, but they replaced the grass for one game and it cost $400,000. Because like I said, with firing these coaches, when you have hundreds of billions of dollars, which this family has, they're going to be unfazed by every expense because $40 million to them is not the same as it is to Mark Davis or Mike Brown. Hell, $40 million to them is much different to Jerry Jones or Robert Kraft. The amount of cash that family has is basically unlimited. Like unlimited in a room full of super rich guys. They might be the richest. So it's going to be fascinating to see how they handle it because they could throw, ultimately, if you wanted to get Sean Payton, what if I threw $200 million at him? Now, you could argue Sean Payton's already rich. He doesn't need it. But there gets to a point where I don't care who you are. Someone throws an amount of money your way. You sure think about it. You think long and hard about it, and you might just say yes. And I think on the flip side, I think Carolina is interviewing Jim Caldwell and Frank Reich. I would imagine that Dave Tepper, after just going through what he did with Matt Rule, a guy from college, no experience, maybe he just wants a guy who's been a head coach in the NFL again. Hell, Steve Wilkes, who did an admirable job, had been a head coach in the NFL. One and done, but had just been there before, had steered the ship, had been the guy in the driver's seat. So my gut would say, just based on that, you never know, would be that Tepper this time, because usually, like, think about the Arizona Cardinals. They went from Bruce Arians, and a couple years later, they got Kliff Kingsbury. Usually go the opposite of what you had. The 49ers had Jim Harbaugh, hard-assed, and they went to Jim Tom Sula. Usually kind of ebb and flow based on the style of coach that you had or their background. And I saw Tua. He hasn't been cleared yet. I think most people, believe if he's cleared, he shouldn't play. He's going to want to play. It's just that simple. Now, I think if you're the league, under no circumstances can you allow the Miami Dolphins, who you've already nailed for multiple infractions over the years, even if this guy is cleared to play, allow him to play on Saturday or Sunday. Because if in that game he gets slammed to the ground and is lying there motionless and has his fourth concussion in 3 months, and I'm not a huge believer, like, that's a terrible look. Depending on who you ask, everything's a terrible look. I think we all agree that would be rough. And I just wonder if the league makes some calls like, hey, guys, this fucking ain't happening on our watch. And so I would be stunned if he plays. And I think the point spread reflects that. Because, listen, I'm not the biggest Tua guy, but if you put him in the game, they're clearly much better off than the scrubs they're rolling out. And last but not least, Matt Stafford has been rumored to potentially be retiring. I came out and said, I'm planning on being back. I ain't leaving, as Leo once said. Now, here's the thing. If Matt Stafford comes back, if Aaron Donald's healthy, if Cooper Kupp's healthy, they do have some high-end players. Now, Matt Stafford was not good this year. Maybe he needs to get his surgery on his elbow, because that was a problem leading up to the season. But I wouldn't just act like the Rams are immediately going to become the Houston Texans. Like, they do have some talent on their team. They have some guys who've been to Pro Bowls. They have some guys that, sure look like they were headed to the Hall of Fame. Not Stafford, but Donald and probably Kupp. We'll see. I guess Kupp's still got a little ways to go, but he's had some pretty unreal seasons. That's going to be fascinating to watch that shape out and see what Sean McVay ends up doing.